Dear podcast, motherhood is so hard. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about motherhood. What a mother. Just like the title. We're going to get into all of the pieces. Again, I'm going to talk from my experience, what I've gone through, and also what I've learned, because the goal of these is to always share what I've learned and to just go through the motions because, somebody might also be going through it. So, welcome back. Episode number 3. I did write some notes for this one because I do not want to forget a thing and I want to stay a little bit more organized. So, let's get into it. All right, I'm going to talk about all the ups, the downs, the pretty, ugly, all of it. Let's start off with I'm a mom. That is wild to me still. And I want to talk about if I wanted to be a mom because I do think this ties into like the first part of motherhood and how hard it was for me. So, rewind. Did I ever want to be a mom? And the answer is no, and then yes, if that makes sense. So, for example, growing up, I knew girls that, wanted to be moms and they had that motherly energy, if that makes sense. Like, you just know when somebody talks about having kids or I can't wait to be a mom. That never really happened to me, and I had a very, like, free spirited attitude. Like, I never thought about, like, being like a stay-at-home mom or a wife even. Like, it was just very much I'll live my life and we'll see what happens. And so fast forward to when I met my husband. Also, I cannot believe we're going on 10 years of being together. Wow. So it wasn't until I met him a couple years into the relationship, once, I started to see that we were serious and we've had convos. I think it's important when you're dating, if you're dating to marry, if that's the end goal, to always have those conversations. Of course, not like in the first date, but once you're getting serious, to have the big conversations that include like finances, goals, kids. And so that happened for us. And my husband was like, for sure, I always saw myself with kids. So yes, that's something I want. Okay, cool. And my point was, it wasn't until I met him, before we even had that conversation, that I was thinking about kids. Like, it was almost like when you find, as cheesy as it sounds, when you find the right person, it's almost like, okay, like this is it. And then the thought of having a family was just beautiful to me, like with him. Having our own kids and then, doing adventures with our own kids. So that's kind of how that happened. So important. I was a no, not really, to then like, yes. Okay. What else? Let's see. Baby. So let's talk about him. He was planned and we always kind of just wanted to have everything under control, which, surprise, life is, you can't do that. But we did plan him. And I want to talk about like the perfect or right time, because I've learned that there's not such a thing. Like, for me being a diabetic, I do have to plan these kinds of things a little bit. So I talked to my doctor before I even got off birth control. To give you some timeline, I got off birth control like, I think it was like March, the beginning of the year, and then didn't even get pregnant until towards more the end of the year. But it was, you know, let's get your glucose levels. If you're a diabetic, you know what an A1C is. For those of you that are not diabetics, you're lucky. Just kidding. The A1C is like an average glucose number that they take by blood, and they measure, how your diabetes is going, or how it is, or how controlled it is. So I got my test done, and my doctor gave me the okay. And then my husband and I, were like, okay, do we want to continue to try this year, or do we wait? And it was a lot of back and forth of when is the right time. And we held off for a few months, and then we just had a conversation like, what are we waiting for, almost? Because it was like, well, where do we want to live? Or do we want to move? Or maybe we still got to do this and that. There was one thing that I really wanted to do, and that was finish college, which I accomplished, and I did. But then there were other things, right? Like, then I was like, wait, but what if this? So at some point, it almost felt like there were just excuses. And so we really were just like, you know what? Like, what are we waiting for? One big thing for myself that my doctor pointed out. My doctor's a female, because I feel like this is going to sound like a man would have said it. But she was like, the younger you are, excuse me, the younger you are, the easier on your body. And that kind of stuck with me, because I was, I'm only getting older. And as a woman, unfortunately, we do have a biological clock. Okay, so there's never a right time. I think if you're going through this flip-flop kind of that we went through, I think you just really need to see if you have like your course, your big foundation, your pillars. For example, like jobs. We are good with our jobs. We have stable jobs. And then things like school. I knew school was going to be hard to continue with a child. So we had like the big things taken care of. And at that point, life will prepare you for the right time, I think.
All right, down the timeline. So we got pregnant, and my pregnancy was so good. I had an amazing pregnancy. I loved being pregnant. I actually the other day told my husband I miss being pregnant. I was looking through some pictures, and I was just, I miss it. I loved it. I thankfully had an easy, I feel like, pregnancy. Like, I never really got morning sickness other than a couple of, my phone, other than a couple of times. But other than that, everything else was pretty relaxed. I think I was also expecting the worst, just because of everything I would read for like type 1 diabetic moms. The doctors, they make it very clear, like it's very, serious that you maintain your sugars and blah blah blah. And so I think I was expecting for a much harder, worse pregnancy, and it really wasn't like that for me. I felt great probably 85% of the time. My diabetes control was easy. I thought, it was going to be hard. I thought in some cases they would give you like more medication and a lot of adjusting of insulin dosage. And we did adjust insulin dosage, but I didn't feel like it happened as often as I would think. And at the beginning, they even had to lower my dosage because apparently like hormones and whatnot also cause or affect insulin in your body. And so like I was needing less insulin, and so I felt pretty good. And again, like the doctor's appointments, I think that was also helpful. They were very easy and very positive. A plus too, being a diabetic mom, automatically you are considered a high risk, and they do all these extra blood work and ultrasounds, which was amazing because this is my first pregnancy, so I have nothing to compare it to. But I had friends tell me they had like a couple pictures or a few pictures of ultrasounds, and you guys, I have a little case full of them. I got so many ultrasounds because they check for certain things that happen with diabetic moms, like something in the heart. They said something in the brain and something in the spine. I really couldn't tell you all the details. So they were looking at those things pretty often, especially the heart. I know the heart was like a big one that they would check, and like they even had a specialist look at it and whatnot. And everything, every ultrasound was just looking great, perfect. Um, like everything was just so well. And again, I felt so good. So everything was great there. And again, I had such a beautiful pregnancy and I felt so good. Like I felt, I think, more confident than I had ever felt in my life. And even now, after being a mom, there's something that happens to your confidence, and we'll get into that. So pregnancy was great. One thing that always made me nervous, because they always from the beginning made it known that my delivery was gonna be as controlled and as planned as possible. So induced labor, they don't let you make it to the 40 weeks or not even 39 weeks. So I always just knew that I was gonna have like an induced labor. And fast forward to like 30 some weeks, baby is breached. We had only a few weeks or even a couple weeks to try and make him flip, or we were just going to plan for a C-section, which that made me nervous. And I tried everything. I went to like get acupuncture, swimming, exercises, like you named it, crawling. Yes, I was that woman crawling on my living room floor, and he never flipped. And so we did go ahead and just plan the C-section, especially because we were also like against the clock. Again, they won't let me go to the 40 weeks. So they go based off like the baby's size, and as a diabetic mom, the babies tend to be bigger just because of the glucose levels. And so he was like, we want to go maybe 38 weeks max. And so we just ran out of time and we just couldn't flip them. And so we went ahead, planned the C-section. And I was very nervous because you hear all these stories of how much harder it is than a natural birth. So very nervous for that. Scared, of course. It's, a major surgery and you're not even put to sleep. So scary all around, but that was what was going to happen. And we obviously were just ready for it. Look, especially myself. I know I said the pregnancy was beautiful, and it was, and I felt amazing. But towards the end, my back, my hips, everything just hurt. And there was already no sleep going on. Okay, so I'll do a quick like birth story. I don't want to make this episode like 2 hours long because trust me, I could. Or actually, I also want you guys to tell me if you enjoy like the shorter ones, like 40-minute episodes, or if you like those longer ones that are like an hour or so. Let me know. We have our Instagram page where you can comment, send us messages, dear_podcast on Instagram. Okay, so quick delivery story. Everything was planned. We scheduled the C-section for a Monday, July 11th. Doctor said be there at like 5 a.m. Great. And baby actually came on a Sunday. So it was Saturday, it hit midnight, so then it was Sunday, if that makes sense. And so water broke. I had no contractions, and we got our stuff and just headed to the hospital. And so you get there, and then they check to see if in fact your water had broken. And I mean, I knew I knew that I had. But they check you anyways, and yep, okay, great. And then, they know what's going on, and well, it was scheduled for tomorrow, but he's breached, and blah blah blah. So they're like, yeah, we'll get you ready for the C-section. And we got there at like 1 a.m. And maybe half an hour later, a nurse walks in, or an hour later. My time frame is all messed up. But point is, they were like, well, we have an emergency C-section that we got to do. So, you don't really have contractions that are steady or back to back or whatever that is. So we are going to do her first and then we'll come get you. Great. I fell asleep. My husband fell asleep. And then I think it's around like 5 a.m. We get woken up and they're like, all right, we're ready. So it was craziness all of a sudden. Um, and we walk into the operating room. I don't know for some reason why that is funny to me. Like, well, not funny, but almost amusing. Like, you literally just walk into the operating room. You walk into the room where you're going to be cut open. But anyways, yeah, we walked into the room. They prepare you. Oops, sorry. They prepare you, and that was like that's that. Like, it's so crazy because it happened so fast. The nurse woke us up at like 5 a.m. Baby was born around 5:30, and like that's it. Like, it's so fast. And so the birth, I do have to talk about kind of like the birth experience, like him being out and like meeting him or seeing him for the first time. So C-section, they have your arms kind of out and out of the way. So it's not, at least the hospital where I gave birth, it's not like you get to just like instantly hug them and put them on your chest like you would a natural birth. And so they took the baby, and then they have nurses that are there for the baby, and then they put him in that little crib thing. And I could see him from my angle. I could see like his little face as they were cleaning him up. And and then my husband, he gets up and goes over, and he's looking at him, and through it all, so the anesthesiologist, he is communicating with you and asking you how you're feeling, because a lot of things can happen. Like, the medicine drops your blood pressure, which happened to me, and that feels awful. And then so he's there to just kind of inject all these medicines into your IV to make you feel good and stable. And while all of that is happening, at that moment I was feeling pretty good because he had already done whatever he did to make me feel better. And so then my husband's over there with the baby and the nurses, and I do hear a couple of things, like he's asking like what happened or what is that. And I didn't think anything of it because my husband is very much curious, and even at the ultrasounds he would ask questions. And so he just wants to know, and he was very involved in that way. And so I didn't think anything of him in the conversations with the nurses. And he's a man, so I'm thinking he's probably asking like about the umbilical cord or something, because everything is just so wild. But then at some moment before the nurses were like, "Are you ready for him?" I started to feel sick again, but it wasn't like a blood pressure problem or even like a low glucose problem. It was more like a panic feeling. And so I'm voicing that to the anesthesiologist. I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm on the verge of a panic attack. Like I just don't feel good. And so he's like telling the nurses, like, 1 second, let me make you feel good, and then we'll get the baby. And so he did some anti-anxiety medicine. I don't know which kind, who, what, when, why, how, where, nothing. Because everything just happened so fast. And by the time that he's done doing his little cocktail mix of medicine, and it works instantly because it's through the IV. And then finally they're like, here's your baby. And so they, again, your arms are like out in a way, so you can't really like carry or hold him, but they put him really close to your face, like you're face to face. I kissed him, and it was just like a crazy moment. So at this time, my husband already knew because he already saw him, but he hadn't told me. Everything he told me was, I had like this little panic attack episode, and my husband was just telling me right beforehand, before I started to feel this way, like he was just beautiful. He's here. He's perfect. I love you. Great. And then, so he, I think, just didn't know or wasn't ready yet to just disclosed of everything. And so finally, I get to see him, and the way I remember it was almost so he's already wrapped in blankets, and it was almost like they just unwrapped him to show specifically his hand. So, in the last episode, I talked about him having a limb difference. And what that means is for him, because there's so many ways and the things that a limb difference can be. So, for him, he was born without a right hand. And so he only has to like the elbow down, or like just down to the elbow, and that's it. And so that memory was almost like they just unwrapped him, and it was almost like the only thing I could see was that. And of course, it was a shocker because none of the ultrasounds caught it, and every appointment was just, he's so good, everything looks great. So, of course, we did not expect that, and of course, it was a surprise. And I could say that there were a million feelings and emotions going through, but honestly, I just don't know what I would have done without that anti-anxiety medication, because I did have a little bit of a reaction, but it was very much like my husband was just looked at me before I could even like burst into tears, and he was like, "It's okay, like he's great. We've got this." And then it was almost like everything else was just numb. And that could have also been the shock, or again, the drugs. I couldn't tell you. And so fast forward to, so actually the days at the hospital were pretty good. They felt great. I felt good, happy. I felt on cloud nine. My baby was here. I had a family in town. It just felt good. And fast forward to 3 days later, 4 days, I can't remember, you get sent home. When you are home, reality really sets in. So we're home. Thankfully, my husband was able to take 2 weeks off work, and he was with me, and there were still hard days, but that chunk was a pretty good chunk comparable to what was coming. And so we're first time parents, first of all. So there's that component where we are learning how to even be parents, what to do, how to do things. Having a baby is a lot of work, and there's a lot of questions that I didn't even realize I would have. And so everything is just super new. We're trying to work through it. You are sleep deprived and you're tired. On top of that, I was recovering from a C-section. Although I say it was very easy for me, I felt like my recovery was just easy, and I felt very little pain, and so it was great in that way. So we're home, and at this point, I feel like this is where everything starts to hit. Let's get into the ugly parts that I went through, or the not so pretty and the very hard stuff. So everything starts to hit. When you're pregnant, talking from experience, at least for myself, you plan like the baby's room, and what you're gonna buy is always with like your baby in mind and whatever you imagine. And so when you're home and you come back with now your baby, and so now you've met him, I obviously did not imagine that we would have to deal with the challenges that were thrown at us, because we were never prepared for that, because we never knew. So let me explain. For example, the little things like buying the clothes was such an exciting, happy moment for myself. And having to come home, it was very hard because, for example, he doesn't have a full hand, right? So obviously, the clothes aren't custom made. And so you have that little detail, but it's so in your face. I think one of the first things that really got me was, when they're babies, you do like those gloves so that they're not scratching their face and whatnot. And so it was, again, the smallest details. I go to grab a little glove, and just the thought that I didn't need two gloves broke me. So, like, the little mittens broke me. And I think that's where kind of everything started to roll in as far as like reality. And that was what we were going to have to deal with and work through. Now, he's 6 months now, and I can say how I wish I could have told myself that is not a big deal. Like, the little mittens is not a big deal. But let me tell you, there's nothing anyone could tell you that will make the situation lighter or even make you feel better, to be honest. So if I could say something to myself, would be write it out. Like, cry it out, write it out, work it out. Whatever it is, you'll get through it, but you do have to write those emotions, because again, there's nothing you can say that's gonna make the situation feel better. And you just have to get through the emotions. And as cheesy as it sounds, time really does heal. And so that happened for me in a few different ways. Buying him like the toys that he already had, especially because I've never met anyone with a limb difference. I've never even seen anyone with a limb difference, and yet alone knew how to even help him, support him in the best way possible. And so on top of that, I knew I had to teach myself or get educated, get some knowledge on what it meant for us as a family and for him. And so that was very hard, and it was very overwhelming, because you feel like you knew your life was going to change just by simply having a baby. But there's kind of a norm piece to that, right? Everybody has a baby and everybody gets through it. It's different when you have a baby that has a limb difference or something's going on that could potentially affect their life. So a couple things like that happen where I would have these breakdown moments, like the little mittens or putting on a little onesie or having to roll up the little sleeve, things like that. So those little things were catching up. And again, it's the little things that just kind of made me question everything. Like, how are we going to do this? More so like for him. Like, that's the next part I want to talk about motherhood. You obviously know you're going to love your children. But let me tell you something. I was not prepared for how strong and how much you love your children. And so what I mean by that is, the best way I can explain it is, your heart is literally out in the world, and you're so like vulnerable and connected to those children, is how I see it, that it's almost like whatever they feel, you feel. And I understood now that saying. How does it go? Like, you're only as happy as your saddest child. I only have one right now, but I could tell you, just me imagining maybe some of the challenges he was going to come across broke me. Almost like it was happening to me. And in a way, I do consider like it was happening to me, because again, I felt like, he has my heart. Like, he's out in the world. Like, my heart is out, not walking yet, but my heart will be out walking in the world. And that was very hard for us. For me, I'm only talking from my experience. I'm, sure my husband has his side and what he went through, but so as a mom, was not prepared for that strong emotional connection. Like, it's going to happen, but you just don't know what to expect. And I want to throw this in here because this is where I feel like that snowball started to happen. We had an appointment down at the city with an orthopedics place, doctor, whatever, and it was so they could just take a look at the x-ray, and I thought would be to educate us a little bit on the situation, maybe get some answers. I don't know, something like that. Baby was not even 2 weeks old. It was very like, we got out of the hospital, and I think in like 3 days, 4 days, we had this appointment after leaving the hospital. So we go down to the city. I'm actually looking forward to the appointment because aside from the limb difference, all of his tests came back normal and healthy. So I'm already like, that's a win. And so my personality is, I gotta know the reasoning, and I just gotta know how things work. I don't know why, but I just can't rest until I have what, like, point A to point B. That's how that works, and there's some sort of closure. We go to the appointment, to make it short and sweet. The doctor was nice, but I got zero educational knowledge that I was hoping to get. I got no answers other than it's a fluke. It happens, or we just don't know why. But he's a miracle. Great. At that time, I would say like not good enough. I had to dig deeper and ask more questions to. They don't really know why it happens, other than, at least for him and his experience, his situation is just something in the blood flow at very early in pregnancy. Like, I think she said 5 weeks of pregnancy. The body starts to create all these blood vessels, and something blocked the blood vessels to his right hand, which then made him not be able to develop the rest of his hand. That was the one explanation I got, and then we just don't know what blocks the blood flow or how, why, and it's a fluke. So, to the icing, the cherry on top of this appointment is that was about 5 minutes of the appointment of me getting some sort of, I guess, answer, and the rest of the appointment, I think it was like a 30 to 40 minute appointment. Let me remind you, he's not even 2 weeks old. I am very fragile. I am just mentally, well, and also physically, but mostly mentally. I'm just very fragile, and I'm going through it. And tell me why this doctor, after explaining the blood flow and the fluke, she goes on to say, and this was her main focus, how kids get bullied, but we have the advantage because we know what my kid will be bullied for. Yes, a professional healthcare provider literally gave me a lecture about bullies and how we were going to deal with that, and it was just going to happen. And as a mom, whether your kid has a difference that you can physically see, you just never want your kid to get bullied. And I knew eventually, like, bullies are everywhere, and I've been bullied myself. One thing too that she said, that like, she just started off very like on the wrong foot with me, because here we are, talking about physical stuff, like your physical appearance and how unfortunately kids are mean. And she goes and decides to point out my husband and myself's physical appearance and makes the assumption that you folks never really had to deal with bullying because you're good looking people. Those were her exact words. That's how she started off the bullying conversation. And right off the bat, I'm like, no, 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 don't like that. And how hard it's going to be, and how we have to raise a strong, confident little boy to handle the bullies. Now, let me tell you something. Whether he had a physical difference, my kid, I've strived to have my kids raised with confidence and kindness always. And so maybe we should talk about bullies in the sense of parents, let's do better and teach our kids, because I don't believe anyone is born a bully. I believe, we learn from our environments, from what we see, and we just need to teach. Okay, that was my little rant moment, because to this day I cannot believe a healthcare professional talked to me about that. And of course, I'm a mess. I broke down because I hadn't thought that far. I hadn't thought that far into my kid possibly coming home one day from school or wherever and crying to me because he got bullied of something that you can't change. Okay, so that appointment was awful. And we, well, we went home and I was just, I think, done. I was like, wow, like, I don't think I have anything left in me, and I don't know how else to like stay strong and continue in a healthy way where I'm providing for my child. And because you hear that you can't pour from an empty cup. At this point, I don't even feel like there was a cup. Okay, so back to we're home, we're going through the motions, and my husband and I are doing things and meeting with like my therapist, and we're working through it, and we're doing things to help the matter and like really get ourselves strong. Back to a more lighter part of motherhood, the pretty side of motherhood. I also want to talk about how amazing it was. Number one, you're bringing a life to earth. That is pretty amazing yourself. But for me, it was also watching my husband become a dad. Like, that was such a beautiful experience that I did not think I would love and enjoy as much as I did. I mean, this man stepped up in a way I could not even express or explain. Even like, I'm even just having a hard time finding words to just say how amazing he was. Super attentive, super helpful, and for myself, physically, mentally, I mean, it was incredible. And then just watching him bond with the baby was next level. If you guys are parents and you had the same experience, I'm sure you understand that deep emotional feeling of just how beautiful it is. And that was one of the biggest things that I think helped me, or that was like the strength. That was what was filling my cup. And this place in life where it was very dark for me, just because it was so beautiful. Also, watching your baby grow too. I mean, from a newborn stage, they're just kind of there, but I'm talking about watching the little like faces that they start to make, the little body scrunch. I mean, all of that stuff is just so beautiful, and I'm glad I have pictures and video to look back on some of those times, because it's almost like you're on survival mode, and a lot of that is hazy for me. It's all kind of foggy, and I was dealing with a lot of other stuff that I feel like took over that nice nostalgic moment. And I think even, for new moms in general, you are surviving and trying to figure it out, that you're forgetting to pause and enjoy those little precious times that you later
realize, like, wait, I don't remember a lot of it. At least that's kind of what happened to myself. I was just, like, where did the time go? And when did he get so big? And how are we not in that newborn stage still? Okay. Mom guilt. This one's a big one. I knew about mom guilt. I know it happens no matter how perfect you are. And so mom guilt, I think, hit me hard in the sense that I didn't realize I could feel guilt for a lot of things that I felt, and they're small ones too. For example, um the feeling that you're not doing enough, although you're nonstop being a mom from the moment you're always a mom, but working very hard for your baby, for yourself, the household, making sure you have food, cleaning, whatever it is. You are doing a lot and you are very much working hard. And I was shocked to feel the guilt of I'm not doing enough or I'm not doing well enough. And I think that was a big one for me because as a perfectionist personality, I really did feel like sometimes I was just not doing things well enough. They weren't good enough for my baby, like my own standards were too high for myself. Also, knowing that having time for yourself was important and it's good. Remember, you can't fill from an empty cup. I would have guilt to even take an hour or half an hour for myself. And baby's with dad, so he is with like the best person he could possibly be with. And I can have an hour to myself, whether that's to watch a show, go take a walk, go to the store. Although I knew it was good for me, I had so much guilt while doing it. I just felt like I was abandoning my baby, which sounds so silly. And I still have some of that. And it is getting better because then you realize like they're okay and it's fine. Like everything works out and we're okay. The next one, not knowing what he cries. This was especially like at the very beginning. I feel like as they grow, it gets easier knowing kind of what they want or what they're crying for, and you just, you learn them a little bit more. But when they're newborns, I had a hard time with this one because it was, oh, I had a sneeze coming in. I could not figure out sometimes like what was going on. If it's like, are you hungry? Are you sleepy? Are you in pain? I think that one too. If you don't know if your baby is in pain, right? Like when do you know that something is hurting them, or how do you fix that? Or so I had a lot of guilt if I couldn't make him feel better, that it was because of me that they were crying and they were not okay because he's just trying to communicate, but I'm not understanding. So that one was a big one. And then to tie in with the guilt of not doing well enough, some days I really only had like, if anything, half of myself to give, especially when my husband went back to work. I was fortunate enough to take a good 4 months off of work, and I could just focus on the baby and the household and myself and trying to make myself be better and feel better. And a lot of the times, I did most of it by myself, and my parents don't live here. And so families just was very limited. It was hard because I had to really figure it all out, and then I didn't have a lot to give, and that would make me feel bad. I would have so much guilt that my baby wasn't getting the best of me, and that somehow was going to affect them in the long run, or I was doing him a wrong by not always being okay, and that's unrealistic. We're not always going to be okay, and I think as long as we are aware that we're not always going to be okay, and
if that means that today the house is going to look like shit, because it is what it is, I'd rather do that now than push myself through like the cleaning and then eventually just become more tired and more miserable. So that's the thing, a good piece that I've learned and that I could even give advice on is allow yourself, especially for us, the control freaks and perfectionists, allow yourself the mess. Allow it to be messy. The cleaning will never stop. The mess will never stop. Like, just pick and choose the days to where you want a very organized household. And when you can't get that, focus on the things that you're doing. Like, for example, the playroom is a mess. And instead of looking at all the things that are scattered on the floor and the baskets are not where they're supposed to be, I now look at it as we had so much fun playing that all the toys are on the ground, or my baby was so excited for this toy and that's why it's out of place. And I try to do the same thing with the living room and the kitchen. Like, the kitchen's a mess because we made yummy food and we got to sit together and eat. So a lot of that stuff is what I'm currently working on, and I would highly recommend for anybody that likes to have a neat house, embrace the mess, really, because that will give you so much more peace of mind. I know it has for me, and I stress less about what the house looks like. And that's that, people are living in the house, so there's gonna be things that are gonna be moved around, and that's that. Like, you can't control every room in the house 24/7. Okay, the next chunk here, I feel like this is gonna be one of those long episodes, but there's just so much to motherhood. Again, the ugly, the pretty, and the hard. And this next one's kind of a hard one. I even debated on speaking on because it's so. Let's get into it. Postpartum depression is very much real, and it happens to a lot of us. And I, to this day, can say that I did go through some of it, and I don't want to say like I'm justifying it, because every person that goes through it, it's justifiable. Your body is going through so much. And so, on top of your body going through so much, I also had that new challenge of and new fears, really, and a lot of unknowns. And that was the heaviest thing, I think. And I like to think and tell myself, if we didn't have that part of that challenge to deal with in that newborn stage and the new stage of being a parent, it would have been perfect and amazing. I can say that because I have a comparison, but maybe it wouldn't have been all perfect and I would have felt 100% myself. Maybe even with him having two full hands, I was still maybe going to go through postpartum depression. I don't know. And so I debated on even talking about it because of that reason. I like to think and tell myself that, well, if I didn't have to deal with X, Y, and Z, life would be just pure bliss and perfection right now. But again, you don't know. Everything is so hard, and it wasn't just that was hard. It's trying to figure out how to take care of another life. So for this, I think a lot of what I was struggling with, I think, was a good grief portion. And I learned that even like when you become a mom and your baby's completely quote unquote normal, you still go through a grieving portion or grieving stage because you are grieving your old life. I do feel like I had a little bit of this, but honestly, not so much. And I went into this pregnancy knowing that life was never going to be the same. And I hear a lot like you lose yourself or you just want to go back to yourself. But it's like, how am I going to go back to myself without baby? And now I have one. Like, you are your new self. So I think I prepared myself that way, where this one didn't hit as hard. But I was definitely going through a grieving stage. because of my son's limb difference, because I never imagined this. We weren't prepared for it, and it was all at once just a wave of figure it out and this is your new life. I have mentioned in the past too, like finishing college and my degree is in psychology, and so a lot of like mental health is top priority in my lifestyle. And I knew some of the signs within myself where I knew I wasn't okay. And I've had a therapist I've worked with for a long time because of other stuff, which I do want to do a mental health episode where we kind of dissect that a little bit. But I'm so glad I have her and I worked with her through this situation. I knew to reach out, whether that's with her and or my husband, and just really talk to people. Like I called my dad one time and my husband, and also knowing how hard and heavy it was for him and how sometimes you need to dump on other people. But to tie it in with, feeling the postpartum depression and stuff, I also had, my team of doctors, and they're also keeping an eye on it, offering medication. I do want to say that whatever your treatment plan is, just make sure you have one, whatever works for you. If you are feeling not yourself and it's like everything just feels heavy, try little things first. Like just reach out and talk to somebody, and always just be aware and connect with your body and ask yourself how you really feel and where you're at and what needs to happen for you to feel whatever your normal is or whatever your feeling good is. And so working with, obviously my therapist, my team of doctors, I will share I never took any antidepressants. I was very close to, but I got through some of my hard stuff, and just, talking to my therapist and looking at all my options, we tried other things first that I think worked. I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel, where I described it as I never even saw a tunnel to begin with. So the light at the end of the tunnel started to happen for me. I started to have better days. I started to feel better. And little by little, I did that. And I was just always checking in with myself. And why do I feel this way? Or do I need to do something? Is it time for me to schedule another session? And doing that is very important. And so I encourage anyone that's going through something hard, or it's not good and it's not healthy to keep it all in. I understand for some people, talking about emotions is weird and uncomfortable, so maybe write them so they're out of your body. Work out, that's also a good way to kind of just put your emotions like in a physical form and get it all out. So yeah, that was kind of like a good chunk of the first 4 or 5 months. I think again he's 6 months, and I think that we are finally in a place where I feel strong again, and the biggest motivator is him. If I'm not strong for him, how am I going to lead by example and show him the way of life, and show him, you know, his confidence, and guide him through some of the hard stuff? How am I going to do that if I'm not there myself? So that was very important for me to take care of myself and figure it out, and that's what I did. I know some of it sounds like easy peasy, oh well, just figure it out and work on it and you'll feel better. It's not, because you don't feel like working at it and you don't feel like doing anything to make yourself feel better. You kind of just want to feel better, but that's just not how it works. So highly encouraged just to do even the smallest thing ever, like I know for me, some days was just to get chocolate covered strawberries, and that little thing made me feel good. And so we did that. And other days it was like a whole trip and picnic day. And other days was just a nice, uninterrupted shower. Or I know very early on, I went on the dirt bike, and my doctor thought I was crazy for asking so soon if I could do that because you're very limited on what you can do when you have a C-section. And I think he approved just because he knew like I just needed to do something. But always reach out, and you know yourself better than anyone. Don't keep anything in. It's not going to do you good. It's not going to feel good in the long run, and emotions are uncomfortable, but you got to get uncomfy sometimes. So yeah, that's kind of like the main thing of motherhood. Is hard is my point. There's so much beauty in it. Like now that he's 6 months, he is doing so much. And I mean, right off the bat, even like when we were at the hospital, the nurses were just like, this little kid already has a personality. Like he is just ready, hit the floor running, and he means business. And he really does. He's got a fiery personality. He knows what he wants. It's been great. And I think really the thing that's helped me the most is watching him do every single thing you could expect a 6 month old to do without any challenges or differences, really, or complications. And it's been amazing. I mean, with one full hand and one small hand, he's been able to like hold a bottle, and if he's got to grab things, he figures out how to grab things with two hands, and it's his own way. He is teaching me how he's going to do it, and because I have seen zero challenges for him so far, I have felt nothing but just I'm so proud that he can already just do things. And he has taught me that it doesn't matter how things get done, as long as you get them done and that's what you want to do. That's all that matters. And again, health. If you don't have health, what do we have? So those have been some of the pretty stuff. Just seeing him grow and do things, and he's such a happy baby. Oh, I wish you guys could just see how crazy and happy he is, and adventurous and silly. And I do post a little bit on my personal page, just Jess underscore G, if you want to get a little glimpse of that. But yeah, he's been wonderful. And again, this journey is a wild, crazy one. But I mean, I honestly would not change it a bit because of everything that we have gone through and the things that we're gonna have to deal with. It's created and made a stronger family, I think. And that's all I ever wanted. So, okay, to close this up, because we are about an hour in this topic. Again, let me know if you like longer episodes, but close this up. Let's talk about a little bit of what I've learned. Also, before leaving, I do want to talk about our diary entry, and we'll get to that. But okay, what I've learned is I can't control everything, unfortunately, but God does really have a plan, and my job is to not understand it. I think if I put my energy elsewhere, I'll live happier. But my job is not to understand it, but rather to embrace it, because at the end of the day, it's okay. Everything's okay, and everything turns out how it needs to. I'm so lucky to be his mommy, and I have really found a new value to life. And as cheesy as it sounds, like having a kid really changes your life, but he really changed what life means and what really matters in life. So the value of life is completely shifted for myself, and I know what really matters, and I know what I really want to live by. And that's all thanks to, becoming a mom and having this new purpose. And yeah, so let's collect our thoughts. Let's organize everything. Let's brief a little bit. So, motherhood is hard, but it is really worth it. It teaches, or at least it taught me, how to live more in the present and enjoy really even the smallest things, like a little giggle. I would not even believe that a giggle would have made me cry, and it did. Like, his first giggle made me cry. And so there's little things like that that are new in life, and they just come with motherhood. I didn't know how hard you can actually feel and love your child, and it's been a great experience, a scary one, but also great. And motherhood, or the hardness of motherhood, really never stops here, because you're always going to be their mom, and there are always going to be challenges, whether that's in school, whether they get bullied or not, whatever it is. We're here really to mentor them and help them become whatever they want to become and be the best they can be. The most important thing, especially for you mamas, is to always reach out, ask for help. I talk a little bit on the last episode on how social media helped me connect with moms that were dealing with the same things with having kids with limb differences, and how hard that is, and some of the things that I expressed myself as well. Like, no one can tell you anything really that's going to make you feel better. And you hear it a lot, like, you were chosen because you are the strongest soldier out there, and blah blah blah. And now, yeah, those are very nice things to say, but I did not request to be on God's toughest soldier list. So that was a hard one for me to hear, because it would always just happen from multiple people. You are so strong and only you could, do this. And he is so lucky to have been sent to you because you are special and you can do that. And so it was nice to hear other moms have the same reaction as, like, no, don't talk to me about that, and don't tell me how strong you think I am. And so reach out, because you may feel lonely with your thoughts. And guess what? Somebody may be thinking the exact same thoughts and having the exact same reactions. And again, having one person connect with you and relate makes the world of a difference, makes you feel less lonely. I know it has for me. And so, moms, reach out. Don't feel embarrassed or dumb, because we're all shy and embarrassed to reach out and even feel like we're going to be judged. But I have had conversations and connections with other moms, and they very much offer help, and they're there for you. And a lot of the times we just don't get it because we're not reaching out and we're not asking. And I'm sure if you ask, that other mom will feel nothing but pure joy and happiness that you're reaching out and asking for help, because guess what? They know how hard it is and what you've been through. So reach out. I'm also available through my socials on Instagram. You can reach out. You can reach out to the podcast, and let's chat, and let's just, help each other out. Okay, so motherhood is hard. There are very beautiful things, and I am excited to move forward and start to express how much happiness I've gained and how much I've learned, and kind of leave the hard, dark times behind, because we are moving forward and the baby is only getting bigger, smarter, cuter, and just so much fun to be around. And that's really what I just want. So let's move on to the last step here. The last episode I talked about setting up an anonymous way where we can submit a diary entry, kind of like what you would write to your diary at the end of the day, or have a place where you can share something personal maybe.
And we did get one, and I want to talk about this one too, since we're in the topic of children and uh, family. And so, again, they're anonymous, so I have no idea who they're from. But we got this entry, and I want to share it. It says, I hate my husband's family. They are so rude and disrespectful to me and my husband and our child. They involve themselves in a negative way always. They've left my child out from the other kids, and my husband does nothing. I stay away from them, but that doesn't stop them from causing harm. Ties in a little bit to also my last episode where I talked about a family friend making some comments of, you know, saying how this was a lesson, like my baby having a limb difference was a lesson for me, and this was God's way of teaching me how not to be so and so. And it unfortunately had to take that experience for me to really just, I guess, be much more aware and private of how I'm going to do things with my child and who they're going to be around. So, if you're listening on this episode, really what I can say is I know it's hard because you want family around your kid and you want them to grow up with cousins and, grandpas, grandmas, but sometimes that does more harm if it's not a good environment for them than to not have them. So protect, and I'm glad that you do stay away from that energy. So always protect your babies. Um, I know right now we can control who they are around with. I know eventually we won't, but control who are around your babies. And it's sad because it is family. But then the second part to that too is have, I don't know if you have, but have a conversation with your husband where at the end of the day, both of you are a team. And it's hard when you have families that maybe don't get along. I can't relate because both sides of like my family and my husband's, we all get along and we all love each other and it's been amazing. But I do think that, your husband not doing anything about it without really having much detail, like what could he do about it? Like, if, for example, if like my husband's family was like insulting me or, you know, being mean to my kid, I would expect my husband to stand up for his family and defend. And so, if maybe that's what you're looking from your husband to do, maybe have that conversation with him and express how you don't feel supported, you don't feel taken care of. And, as the father and your husband, he needs to maybe, do that, especially if you feel like they're taking their side, because this is, I think, controversial too. At the end of the day, like when you marry someone, you decide to be on their team and to support them 100%. At that point, yeah, you're going to care what your parents say, but at the end of the day, you married your wife and not your mother. And so your family that you are now building, I think, should come first, especially if it's harming the well being of yourself and your kid. So I know it's hard because they're family, and again, we want them to be around family, but sometimes having that distance can be better than having your child be in an environment where it's not fun and it's not doing them any good. So hang in there, and I hope your husband is on board and you start to feel protected by him, and you have someone that backs you up. So there's that. I really enjoy you guys sending those diary entries. This episode is really long already, but we will continue. I'm gonna figure out if I can post it in a way where it just stays up and you guys can follow the link and post your diary entry and we can talk about it, start a conversation, and we'll see how it goes. And if we like doing that in the podcast, then we will continue. All right, to close it up, I do want to do a motivational quote of the day. Um,
If you're new here, I have a jar of little stars, paper stars. They're folded into stars, and there's a quote inside. So we are going to go ahead and read our quote of the day. Perfect timing because the baby woke up. I can never open these stars. Okay, here we go. Today's quote of the day: it is never too late to be what you might have been. This is by George Eliot. There you go. Follow your dreams, people. Follow your dreams. All right. I am going to go get the baby. Thank you 1,000 times for listening, especially if you have been listening since episode number 1. I cannot believe this is number 3. It feels like I just started it, but at the same time, going by super fast. I I hope you guys are enjoying. I know I have a lot of fun talking about my experiences, and I hope it reaches out in a way where you feel less lonely, you feel heard, and you feel connected. And let's do life together. Doesn't not have to be alone. And that's it for today's episode. We will see you in the next one. Bye.